this is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I apologize for being kind of out of pocket the last few weeks and months. It's been a crazy time, but I'm going to open up the show today and then be with you guys for a few minutes, and I'll be back tomorrow and Wednesday. And then wanted to wish everyone a happy beginning of the Thanksgiving week. What I would like to do today is I greet you live from North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the union. And today, we wanted to just begin the news with, first of all, wishing President Biden a happy 80th first birthday. A lot of concerns about his age. 71% of his own party do not believe he should run again for the presidency. And polling does have him, as of today, being defeated by Donald Trump in a head-to-head election. So many people are worried. With that being said, lots of news going around the world. We've got a new president of Argentina, Javier, I think Milei, who is described as an anarcho-capitalist, really coming for complete reforms in Argentina's economy, reducing spending, very conservative fiscal policy. So we'll see about that. Satya Nadella at Microsoft has tapped Sam Altman from OpenAI to lead a research team at Microsoft. So that's interesting. And as we continue the show, we're talking about it on World Politics Tomorrow. Tremendous concerns right now. The elephant in the room is that as so much focus has been on Israel and Gaza, a lack of focus on Ukraine. And the longer the war goes on and the dangers of funding from the West declining or stopping, particularly with the results of a 2024 presidential election, many people are concerned about how we're taking our eyes off of what is going on in Ukraine. And if Russia is to succeed, does that set a precedent for other dictating countries like China invading Taiwan and also disruption taking place all around the world? We are concerned about this on World Edition, and we're going to continue to talk about it. And as we prepare for holidays, let's remember anyone who's lost a loved one during these times. In Wake County, we lost Commissioner James West, a longtime Raleigh City Councilman and Commissioner and former chair of the Wake County Commission, who passed away this Friday. With that being said, congratulations to Novak Djokovic, who ends the year #1 in the world at the young age of 37, and exciting. And India, of course, losing the World Cup in cricket in a heartbreaker to Australia. Last time India won was 2011, but it was wonderful to watch it at 4 a.m. on Sunday. With that being said, let's get started. And congratulations, Team Australia. I hope Shakil Latimer is joining us. So, Mark, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'll be here for a few minutes. And thank you.
No problem. You forgot one of the most important news stories that was out there and all along those lines and everything. And definitely it is a very significant story. And that was the passing of Rosalind Carter. I know a lot of people
I forgot.
The information around Jimmy Carter and the fact that a lot of folks are hoping that he will make it to 100 and all in that space. But yes, Rosalind Carter was seen as a humanitarian and definitely one that was involved in a lot of things, both in the time that she was First Lady and even afterwards with her husband, Jimmy. But definitely that was something that we did see in the news, was the passing of Rosalind Carter. So I just wanted to give that salute, because that family was definitely one that came up from humble beginnings. As many people remember, he was a peanut farmer, went on to become president, and has still been involved in a lot of things that are humanitarian, including Habitat for Humanity and a number of other things along those lines. So our sympathies do go out to the Carter family and all along those lines. But definitely just wanted to bring that to folks' attention, because I did see that was in the news and all in that space. So definitely just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, I apologize for forgetting that. And I was going to mention it at the end. But we do want to pray for the Carter family. I went to Emory University and was very involved with the Carter Center, and wherever President Carter was, his wife Rosalind was right there at his side on all the work and Habitat for Humanity, the humanitarian efforts around the world, monitoring free and fair elections in Haiti and other countries, addressing diseases like guinea worm and others, and so many things that she did at his side. They're married, I think, longer than any president, couple, I think over 60 years. And she will be missed. I had the honor of meeting their grandson, Jason Carter, who is a state senator and ran for governor and lost. He'll be taking over the Carter Center, I think, or has already taken over. But yeah, real loss. We haven't heard any thing from President Carter about his condition.
Yeah, not at all. We do have a guest. I want to bring in the guest as well as the guest that actually formed a group of folks that are involved in solidarity from the African American community with Israel. So, Dumasani Washington, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, but if I did not, he will correct me and all along those lines. But I'm going to bring him in as he founded a organization that is trying to get more African Americans and more Christian African Americans involved in the space of supporting Israel. So I definitely wanted to bring him in to learn more about this organization that he is part of and to learn more about why it is a pivotal issue. I think he's called it a pivotal issue within the African American community and all along those lines, but definitely he is also tied into some of the African countries as well. I think Kenya is one of them, and there are a number of others as well. But I'll let him speak for himself and all in that space. Glad to have you on, Dumasani Washington. This is myself, and I've been the one in touch with you, Mark Lee, and of course, this is Steve Rao, our regular host, and all along those lines. So if you'll just share a little bit about your book and around why you feel that a lot in the African American community need to be getting more involved in Israel support and all along those lines. So definitely glad to have you on and to hear more about what you've got going on.
Thanks, Mark, and I hope you all can hear me okay.
Yes.
Getting that set up. Apologies for running a little behind here, schedule stuff. But yes, I'm Dumasani Washington. I'm the founder and the CEO of an organization called the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. It's founded about 10 years ago, 2013. Only the last couple of years has it been more emergent and active in this space, simply because after the first year, so people will know, of starting IBSI, I joined the staff as the African American and Diversity Outreach Coordinator for Christians United for Israel back in 2014, served there for about 7 years, and then returned full-time to IBSI to kind of man it here with our staff. Much of what we do is found in my book. This is not the shilling for the book, so people will know, they'll have background. I wrote a book back about 8 years ago called Zionism in the Black Church, Why Standing with Israel Will Be a Defining Issue for Christians of Color in the 21st Century. The second edition came out in February of 2021, so it's available everywhere. People just do it under my name or under Zionism in the Black Church. And we explain much of what we do and why. There is a legacy and a history that is so deep, so profound, so pervasive that it's undeniable when it comes to especially the Black American experience, but we can make that even in terms of the African diaspora, particularly for those of the Christian religion. Zionism in the Black Church basically, I don't want to say catalogs, but it takes an overview of the African American experience. It deals with Africa as well, but it deals more specifically with the African American experience when it comes to its relationship with the Bible, its relationship with the people of Israel. I am a musician by profession, so one of the things that I open up is what is the original form of American music, which is jazz, which goes back to its roots, which is the Negro spirituals. You have people who know any type of American anthology of music. It goes from the Negro spirituals to rhythm and blues and so on and so forth. You would not have what you have as American music today had it not been for the contributions of African Americans, and that started on the slave plantations. And what were those songs? Go Down Moses, Way Down in Egypt Land, Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Elijah Rock, Shout, Shout, Did My Lord Deliver Daniel, on and on and on. And what I talk about in the book is that those themes were biblical, both Old and New Testament, not simply because the slave masters shoved Christianity down the throats of Africans. Say, oftentimes that's the story. That is not the narrative. People forget that Christianity started in Jerusalem, which is Northeast Africa, Southwest Asia. So Africans were well aware of who Moses was, well aware of the Pharaoh and the whole redemption narrative. So those songs and those legends were there. As a matter of fact, Zora Neale Hurston, I discuss in my book, in her book, talked about about the legend of Moses, the universality of Moses, how people have known about Moses for thousands of years and have talked about him and sung about him. No, especially, of course, you know, the whole Egypt is in Africa. People sometimes forget that all these Bible things happened in Africa. So, of course, Africans are very aware. We also talk about in our organization that the first Africa-Israel summit was when the Queen of Sheba traveled about 1,500 miles to visit King Solomon in Jerusalem 3,000 years ago, right? So there's these very, very deep connections that are there. And we talk about those connections in a biblical sense, but in a geopolitical sense as well, right? What that has actually meant, what that relationship has meant in terms of the ancient state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, and then finally, when it comes to the African diaspora in the United States. I'll end by saying this as we're opening up. People often point to the 1950s and 60s in the civil rights movement when Dr. King himself said that the Jewish community had basically, I'm using this term, disproportionately represented itself within that struggle, right? Those who know the history know that the NAACP was founded by both Black American and Jewish Americans. And a generation before you get to Dr. King and Rabbi Joshua Heschel, you had Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald building Rosenwald schools, over 5,000 of them across the segregated South. So again, these are very, very deep ties. How does that relate to Israel? Well, what we recognize is that, unfortunately, when it comes to the debate around Israel, Israel's detractors often will use this same language to distort the real debate and real honest debate that needs to be had. What language? Zionism is racism. That's a lie, but the United Nations codified that lie in 1975 in its own resolution, right? Somehow Israel is a Jim Crow state. Israel is this. Israel is that. They always use it in racial terms when it comes to the Black experience. And whereas no state or no nation is perfect, these things are libels, blood libels. Even when we're talking about the modern day iteration of you have activists on the ground blaming police brutality on things like Israel, right? These types of things that have really, really deep repercussions, they are what I call a pilfering of what we often call the historic Black struggle for freedom. And that's one of the reasons, or some of the reasons, why our organization exists and why I wrote my book.
I appreciate it, definitely, Mr. Washington, and everything. Now, you brought up something that is a narrative that is out there, and I'd love to hear maybe a further explanation of why you discount that narrative, because there is that narrative that the Jewish community is divided and that there is a fraction of the Jewish community that might be more nationalistic than others. And that's when the whole conversation around Zionism comes up and all along those lines. So I just wondered your pushback to that narrative, if you have a pushback to it, because that is one of the things that people will sometimes point to when they point to the current leadership of Israel, as well as just Israel in general, as it being as Zionism being another form of extreme nationalism.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. No, that's well, what I don't know if it's called a pushback, but what we often do in this dialogue, Mark and Steve, is that we point to the fact that no people are a monolith, right? Just what I just gave as an overview of the Black American history. Another Black American come up here and say something very, very different and talk about different things, right? I'll say like a Martin Luther King and his relationship with the Jewish people, and someone up will bring up, Malcolm X and what he said about Zionism, right? And that doesn't mean those are two Black men who are very, very invested in their communities, right? And leading what they felt was the best way in terms of that struggle. They didn't agree. They agreed on some things, right? But there are a lot of things they didn't agree on, right? That means that no people are a monolith. So yeah, there are Jewish Americans and other Jewish people in the diaspora who are not only not supportive of Israel, they call themselves anti-Zionist, right? They'll actually work with other organizations, including rabidly anti-Israel organizations, right? They'll stand with, right? There's a small sect, they're marginal, but a small sect of these rabbis, I can't remember the actual name, Nur Kart or something like that. They go and visit the Ayatollah in Iran, right? They're in the Ayatollah, and the Iranian regime is committed, they say themselves, with their own words, right, to the destruction of the Zionist entity, right? So that's true. So what I say to that often is that, yes, because no people are a monolith or are going to agree on everything all the time, yes, you'll find Jewish people who are either tepid in their support of or completely opposed to the state of Israel. When it comes to the political part, like you mentioned, Mark, and I'm so glad you did, about being Netanyahu's government, and he has been the predominant prime minister for the last almost 20 years, I guess. Now he's been elected many different times. And often people will point to his more right-wing government as a reason. And I often chuckle at that because it's amazing. No one points to Xi Jinping and his destruction of Uyghur Muslims as some sort of delegitimization of China, right? No one's walking around saying China doesn't have the right to exist, Iran doesn't have the right to exist, none of those types of things, right? But they'll point to, and I'm not putting that on the level of saying that these men are the same people or the same types of regimes. What I'm saying is that there is a double standard that Black people recognize probably more than anyone else when it comes to how things are actually parsed, right? So what you had initially, what's ironic to me is this. Before Netanyahu's government was elected, and I'm no Netanyahu apologist. I don't do Israeli politics, right? Likud party, Yesh Atid party. We don't do any of those types of things. When we defend Israel's right to exist, we do it the way Dr. King said. He didn't point to certain politicians and say, I back that politician. He just says Israel has the right to exist, right? And defend itself. What's interesting is that Israel had its most left-leaning government and the most diverse party. There were members of its coalition party included this party that represents part of the Muslim Brotherhood. But the gentleman who's actually, I can't remember the name of his party right now, but his is one, I wouldn't call it anti-Zionist party, but he's very much critical of the Israeli government because there are, of course, Arabs and Jews who are part of Israel's parliament. They were in power before Netanyahu's government or party regained control of parliament. Yet the terrorism against Israel and the attacks against Israel did not subside. And people catch that. In other words, regardless to which prime minister was in power, regardless to which party had the most seats in parliament or in the Knesset, it doesn't make a difference when those who criticize Israel are doing it based on the fact that it's just Israel and not on something substantive.
Yeah, along the same lines, and I'm sure Steve's got some questions. I've got some other panelists that'll probably be joining us as well and everything. But one thing that I was curious about, and just to hear your take on it, is there has been some conversation around definitely the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States, but there has also been some people that have said that there is a rise in Islamophobia as well. And I do know that there have been some efforts in different communities. I'm not sure where you are exactly based at and whether it is still going on in your community, but I know here in Durham, North Carolina, there have been some imams and some Jewish leaders as well as ministers, Christian ministers, that have gotten together and have tried to find that common ground and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, does your organization, because I know you are very much a supporter of Israel, does it have any dealings with the Muslim community? And do you feel that there is some both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism that is going on in our society?
Was that a question to me, Mark? I'm sorry.
Yes, it was a question to you.
Absolutely. So in our organization, and I say this in broad terms, we work with, even though our main focus is the Black American community, right? But our partners and our colleagues span the spectrum: Muslim, Christian, Jewish, in the States, in the UK, in Africa, right? What's always been fascinating to me for years is that I personally know or are aware of in some sort of even social media contact with other people who are non-Jewish, non-Israeli, who are very, very vocal in their support. I have Muslim friends and colleagues who have been virtually, if I can use a Catholic term, excommunicated from their family and their friends for the stance that they've taken that is just, as far as they're concerned, a down the middle stance, defending Israel's right to exist and defending the dignity of the Arab Palestinians. I have friends for whom I have much great respect, right, who have spoken out the way that I've spoken out, but have paid a much higher price than I have. Yeah, I get some criticism and everything like that, but I'm talking about people who getting death threats. I'm talking about people, friends and family don't talk to them anymore, whose mosques don't associate with them anymore. I know these people personally, right? So yes, we do work with different organizations and individuals in doing this because we recognize that this is a very pluralistic thing. This is a very universal issue. What did Dr. King said? A threat to justice anywhere, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? So when we are talking about the Israel advocacy, for people who will look at me and say, you're a Black American Christian, why do you care about this, that, and the other? Well, it's the same way. You know what, gentlemen, I often tell people, long before I was in Israel advocacy as a Christian pastor, I have been advocating and bringing awareness to the slaughtering of Christians in much of the world of what especially the Islamist world. I'm not talking about Muslims in general. I'm talking about now where Boko Haram is slaughtering Christians in Nigeria, where Al-Shabaab is slaughtering Kenyans in Kenya and in that where it borders with Somalia, and so on and so forth. Not just Christians, but also religious minorities. The actual in those parts of the world where that type of violence is happening, Muslims are the ones who are dying at the greatest number, right? And then it's Christians, and then it's others, right? I have been bringing awareness to that since the 1990s, long before Israel was on my radar in that way. One of the correlations was that in the midst of this, the distortion of language, I'm gonna give you one quick example. By the early 2000s, Sudanese were fleeing Sudan by the hundreds of thousands, as well as Eritrea, but for some different reasons, right? And they were fleeing their countries, particularly in Sudan, because of what I just said, the Darfur region. Some people who are listening to this remember about Darfur, and Darfur hasn't gone anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. About 50 Christians in Sudan were just killed just last week, right? With a terrorist organization that seems to have links to Hamas, right? So this has been a universal fight, right? Those Sudanese, for example, fled, tried to get to where they would be free. Some of them tried to go through the Mediterranean and get up to somewhere in Europe. Many of them went through the Sinai, and then if they were fortunate enough and made it to Tel Aviv, Israel, or made it to the border, and the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, would drop them off in Tel Aviv. To this day, you have something like 50,000, maybe plus, Sudanese and Eritrean refugees in Israel, right? Now, as this is happening, there's been some problems. There's been some problems in some of those poor neighborhoods. There's been some problems with some unfortunate actors and everything, not the majority, but there's been some crimes, those types of things. Those things blew up in the media. And those people who call themselves human rights advocates then began to focus on the plight of some of those Sudanese in Israel based on some of the Israelis' visceral response to what was going on. That went viral. What did not go viral was why those Sudanese fled by the tens of thousands from their government. No one wanted to talk about Omar Bashir. Nobody wanted to talk about the Janjaweed. Nobody wanted to talk about how these Christians were being slaughtered. They only wanted to talk about some of the unfortunate things that may have happened to them in Israel. And let me, by the way, say, when I say unfortunate, I'm talking about some skirmishes. Israel, and people have criticized how they may have done it, though they did not give them citizenship, allowed them to stay. They went to university. They run businesses and schools. I've met some of them myself, right? Businesses and daycares, those types of things. What's the point that I'm making? Here, Israel's being demonized on the world stage as a racist state when the Sudanese who actually tried to get to Israel, some of them were killed by the Egyptian soldiers who would behead them as the IDF was watching them across the border. These things are real stories that Sudanese themselves would tell. No one was interested in telling those stories unless they had something negative to say about Israel. That's another reason why we do what we do.
You mentioned earlier,
I got to leave it about
bring it up and everything, and I know Steve got a question, but you mentioned
I got to leave it
Eritrea and Ethiopia. My dad actually worked in Eritrea for a minute. I'd love to hear maybe just a little bit of your thoughts around that conflict, because that conflict has been going on forever and a day as well. Like I said, my dad was a professor and definitely went there, and there has been some conflict between that part of the populations as well. But I'd love to hear maybe some of your thoughts around that.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I can yield to Steve if he has to go. I don't want to make sure I'm.
I just want to thank you for being on, and I think it's important to note it is getting very politicized. So here, even in North Carolina, we have a lot of folks on the other side, saying that we've got to stop the ceasefire. Lots of protests. Even the Raleigh City Council, there were 400 individuals coming asking for a resolution for the Palestinian community, asking for a stop the war. So I think that we have to also look at what's going on both sides and hopefully pray for a peaceful resolution of this conflict. But it's unfortunate that it's being politicized on both ways. But I mean, with that being said, I do feel bad for the death on both sides of the conflict, Israeli and Palestinian. And let's not forget that it was Hamas that initiated the attack, the kidnappings, the brutal murders, and those kinds of things. Now what's happened is the people in Gaza are being victims of the bombing and the violence, but Hamas is basically using hostages as shields, human shields, and so it's just, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but it's a very complicated emotional situation on both sides of the conflict. And, I see that escalating worse and worse every day. So
to that point, Steve, let me just say real quickly, and I'm cognizant of your time. I agree, and we agree in that our organization for years, so this always from the beginning, what we've done all the time in our advocating for Israel's right to defend itself and those types of things, we've also often and consistently highlighted the plight of the Arab Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, right? Because most people are not aware of that. They'll hear one side of that story. And yes, there's the bloodshed, there is the war, the fighting that's happening right now. There are very innocent people being caught up in this, and it is an absolute tragedy. And agree. And to your point, absolutely, with this, particularly October 7th, Hamas goes in, slaughters over 1,000 Israelis, takes another 243 hostages plus, right? And not just Israelis, they're foreign nationals. They just killed a young man from Tanzania in Gaza about 2 days ago, and there are about 240 Tanzanians in Israel. Why are they there? They're learning and working on kibbutz so they can bring all that farming and other technology back to their country. Israel's been doing that for decades, right? So absolutely, this is part of the issue that there are ordinary, just on the ground people who are caught up in the political part of it, who are caught up in the military part of it. And I'll say this one last thing, the people of Gaza who have been under the brutal, absolute rule of Hamas since 2007, right? They have themselves, many of them, protested Hamas. Now, for people who are listening, you have to understand there is no freedom of speech in Gaza. There's no freedom of the press. You can't just go on Twitter and say, I think Hamas sucks. You will die, right? So when they actually march in Gaza City by the thousands, which they have, and the press does not touch it, why? Because it's so politicized, because they're not talking about Israel, they don't discuss it. It was about 2 months before October 7th when the last protest was there, and they were on the street. What were they protesting about? Gentlemen, the same thing they may protest about. They wanted better jobs, better schools for their kids, better opportunities. But because they weren't blaming the Zionist state, because they were holding Hamas responsible, nobody wanted to touch it. Now, these people were arrested, tortured, and many of them killed. This has been going on for years, but it doesn't get discussed. So to T's point, yes, we talk about those things and we try to bring the Palestinian voices to the forefront and say, are you listening to what they are saying? Are you listening to this mother who's crying because her 14-year-old son was abducted by Hamas for daring to attend the protest, and now she doesn't know where he is? That's been going on for years.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you want to tackle the whole thing around Eritrea and Ethiopia. I'm here to bring in Jitovi and Sasha Star, who is actually a Jewish individual from Ukraine and all along those lines, but is actually now living in Canada. And of course, Shaquille Latimer, who is in Australia and definitely has some background as well, as you can tell. And of course, the founder of the network, that being Nick Palvita and all in that space. But definitely,
before I jump off, I want to congratulate Latimer for Australia winning the World Cup in cricket. Congratulations.
I'm a little bit torn because I'm Indian by ethnicity. So what do I do?
Yeah, big game. But I'll be back tomorrow. I want to thank our guests for being here, and we'll be back tomorrow for the hour. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
folks.
and definitely. But we'll continue the conversation without you, Steve. Appreciate your giving that introduction at the beginning. But definitely, Mr. Watson, if you've got any thoughts about that other part of the conflict, because you mentioned that earlier, and I'm also glad that you mentioned Malcolm X, because a lot of people forget that Malcolm X actually changed his view about European Americans when he went on that trip to Mecca and all along those lines. And some people even argue that that is part of the reason of his assassination, those that believe that he was killed internally and all along those lines.
Malcolm X himself even surmised that that's probably why he would be assassinated, right? People often forget that not only do we look back at that, but he himself said that the things that he was saying, his life was in danger, right? He talked about both the whole universality of his message, as well as the threats that were coming directly from Elijah Muhammad. He said these things, and it's amazing because these things are still on video. You can Google them on YouTube, and Malcolm X himself is talking about why his life was in danger and how his life, the attempts that were made on his life even before he was actually killed. So the fact that that still gets murky is always amazing to me, because the man himself was talking about who was after him. So, but to your point about the Ethiopia, you talked about the Tigray region. Yes, there's a genocide going on in Ethiopia. This fight has been going on for a while. It is very deeply complicated politically. I'm not going to even try to unpack it now. But let me say to you that I have Ethiopian, both Jewish and non-Jewish friends, both in Ethiopia and in Israel, right, who've actually talked about this. Some of them are journalists who've written about it. And I can tell you that again, my advocacy long before it was Israel was Africa, not just Nigeria, right? Not just Kenya, but Pan-Africanism, right? Particularly when it came to the plight of human rights and those of religious minorities. Yes, there have been many who have perished in Ethiopia, and the West is unaware, and the media generally, this is a generic statement, does not care, right? If it's not sexy enough, it doesn't care about, and they've never cared about Africans. That's one of the things that the United Nations have been consistent about. They give a damn about Israel and give a damn about Africans. They will actually suck the oxygen out of the room and talk all day about Israel. Do you know that there is a genocide of Christians in Nigeria right now? Over 43,000 have been killed over the last 12 years. The media won't touch it. Why? Because they don't want to discuss that. They want to discuss the stuff that will sell and that will bring them money. I've been doing this since the 90s. When I'm telling you, before there was an internet, I was writing to my congressman old school letters, right? To Barbara Boxer, I'm from California, to Barbara Boxer, for those who don't know, to Dianne Feinstein of blessed memory. I was writing to them, right? Telling them, please say something to the State Department. See, I'm just a young man back in my 20s back in there. So when I hear the conflation of the rights in terms of Israel, knowing full well that these people are saying nothing about Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, tells Al-Shabaab, and I'll say this last thing, over 1 million slaves in Libya since around 2011 when Muammar Gaddafi was killed, silence. Nothing about any of those things. That's one of the reasons why we do what we do with the passion when we do it.
Just really quick, and then we'll turn it over to my other panelists and everything. You just said a term that a lot of people would not associate with Christianity, but it is a term that even some of my family members have been part of, including some that might be considered quote unquote Black nationalists and everything. But when did you get involved in the Pan-African movement, and do you feel that other Christians are involved in that movement as well? Because a lot of times people do not associate Pan-Africanism with this notion of devout Christianity and all along those lines. So I want to hear your thoughts around Pan-Africanism and even the notion that a devout Christian could not be involved in that movement.
Absolutely. It's funny because when we talk about Pan-Africanism, obviously, just like the word Zionism can have lots of different definitions for different people, Pan-Africanism as well can as well. And what's amazing when I consider the Black American journey and the passion or the compassion when it comes to the continent of Africa, I have seen that come from Black Muslims, Black Christians, and so on and so forth. Do we see prominently self-proclaimed Black Christians in the Pan-African space? We don't see it as much, but I would submit to you, Mark, this is what's been fascinating to me about this Israel journey, right? It was more of a thing back in the day. What do I mean by that? Dr. King attended the inauguration of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. He and many of his civil rights leaders, right? That's because there was such a focus. Now, he had a global vision, don't get me wrong, right? But there was a deep passion. He came back to his church in Georgia and preached a message, the birth of a new nation. He actually preached a message based on what he experienced. Here's a Christian pastor very much concerned with the health and the development of Africa, right? Fast forward to Rwanda, 1990s. Black Americans held Bill Clinton to task for what they felt was him not doing enough about that genocide. Mark, I don't know how old you are. You and I might be the same age. I want to challenge anyone listening now. Where is the Black American voice where Africa is concerned now? The genocides that I just listed, how many I don't care if they're Muslim or Christian, how many of them, civil rights organizations, take your pick, how many of them are saying anything about what's going on in Africa to that degree? Christians slaughtered in Uganda. So right, this is actually going on. And when, again, please people understand this type of violence that's happening there, that's religious motivated violence, Muslims are dying at the greatest rate, even more so than Christians in these areas. Where's the Black voice, right? And I submit to people listening that one of the reasons is that the false narrative of the Israel-Palestinian conflict has so sucked the oxygen out of the room that discussion has had almost all the time, and these other ones are not touched, just like the United Nations, hardly at all.
Well, I think you answered the question when you said the media doesn't cover Africa. Because last time I saw Rick Steves' Africa on PBS, I didn't see that. Last time they had an African show on PBS, didn't see that either. But I did buy your book, and I'm wondering if Shaquille bought it too, author of Zionism and the Black Church, available on Amazon.com. Shaquille, who's from Australia, taught me the trick. While you're talking, you can go to Amazon and buy your book. So I bought your book while you were talking.
Well,
So
thank you for
Shaquille
the
usually would buy the book also. So
Absolutely, and I'll confirm in a moment whether or not it's available easily outside of the United States. But,
right, yeah, because you have to buy it from Australia, which is a whole.
While you're doing that,
No, I
before
did.
we
I
go
did
to
also
people, any questions?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well,
just-
Jacoby may have questions
Just so you
because
guys know,
Jacoby
Lee
thinks
is waiting
everything.
backstage.
Jatovi's kind of like on the other side of the question here. Jatovi, he's one of our progressive presidents, so he might have. Yeah,
So honestly, just quickly, the book is available for those of you outside of the United States, and also Lee Newton Rhodes is sitting backstage. Mark, I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
yeah,
He's
he's,
Yeah, I was waiting for him to go on camera, but I did see him there.
he's off camera. All right, okay, Jatovi, progressive president. Tell him how the world really works. This guy knows everything.
No. See, the perfect thing is that Dr. Washington, you're right down the middle, which is perfect. And a lot of the things that you said, which I truly appreciate, is your focus is a lot of humanity and about, being able to speak for the individual who can't be spoken for, and how it's the same passion that I have, and the reason that I get dubbed by Nick as being the president of this and president of that is because the fight for these individuals never gets covered, and that is always my frustration. How, for example, what's going on in Israel, the collective punishment that the Palestinian people are being that's being placed on the Palestinian individuals, even though they're not Hamas, they're still being persecuted. And when people speak up for the people of Palestine, people get labeled, oh, well, you're a Hamas sympathizer. No, it's about the humanity of the situation, the individuals being attacked there. Same thing with those places that you're talking about in Africa that are, Africa doesn't get covered in the media just as you're talking about because there's no money there. What we've been fed for years is that Africa needs Sally Struthers, and that little kid on the camera is poor. Why are we caring about these poor kids? Sally Struthers is already doing that, but they're not, just as you're talking about, the Christians being the genocide happening in Africa and so on and so forth. And the Black voices fall into that whole general media trap. My question to say all that comes around to how do we break that collectivism that we do when we get trapped in that media void that, okay, the media doesn't cover the genocide going on in Africa. We know because of the money behind it, but how do we break that cycle? The media doesn't cover the fact that, yes, people were upset about Netanyahu. There were Israelis who were upset about the way Netanyahu was, and the media doesn't cover that. The media doesn't cover that the Palestinian people doesn't want Hamas. But we're doing this whole collective attack on Israelis, a collective attack on Jewish individuals, creating this anti-Semitism, doing the same thing with the Palestinian people, creating this anti-Muslim. That's my frustration. How do we break through that?
And Jatovi, am I saying your name correctly, sir?
Yep.
Okay. And I appreciate that question. And I agree wholeheartedly in the sense that that has to be the focus, right? The focus has to be the people. As a pastor, what I've said to our congregation before, one of my favorite books in the Bible is Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is the Jewish man who was a Persian. He was the king, the servant of King Artaxerxes. And he returned to Jerusalem to help rebuild the wall. And the rebuilding of the wall happened in fairly quick order, right? Because a couple of generations earlier, Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon had destroyed the wall. And the reason I bring that story up to answer your question, Jatovi, is that what Nehemiah experienced and discovered was that the smaller threat to his rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem was from the outside, the different nations that hated the Jewish people. The more prevalent threat were the people inside, other Jews who were elites who didn't appreciate him bringing religious and civil reform. He began to fix the fact that poor Jews were being exploited by their Jewish brothers and sisters. Banks were foreclosing on land and taking kids as slaves, which is actually against the Torah. So when Nehemiah saw this, to your point, Jatovi, he went, oh, wait a minute. We rebuilt the wall, but what the heck is this? Why are my Jewish brothers and sisters oppressing my other Jewish brothers and sisters. That's when he got the more keen death threats. That's when he got, even some of the prophets began to prophesy against him. What's the point that I'm making? He became very unpopular when he lifted up the plight of all those who were being oppressed. History has always taught us that. When did Dr. King get killed? When he started talking about poverty universally, not just in the black community, but everybody. When did Malcolm X get killed? After returning from Mecca and saying, you know what? I saw Muslims who look like me, who look like him, who look like her. I recognize that I've been sold a bill of goods. Elijah Muhammad didn't want to hear that, right? So the answer to your question, Jacoby, is to do what we do by raising our voice. We just have to do it with the courage, knowing that it has never been acceptable. It has never been popular to lift up the plight of the poor. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18, verse 17 says, rebuke the oppressor, plead for the cause of the widow. What is the God of Israel saying to the Jewish people? You have forgotten the poor, the widow, the orphan, right? And that's not me slamming the Jewish people. I'm talking, it's a universal thing. What happens is that once a person gets in power, once the person gets used to certain people doing yes, sir, and no, sir, and go, that human nature dictates that they forget about the things that are the most important. And this is why this becomes so important. Yes, you're right. Anti-Semitism comes from a warped story of telling what's going on in Israel, for example, right? And then the dismissal of the Palestinians who really do want to be free from the yoke of Hamas. They get lumped in with Hamas because no one wants to do the hard work of actually listening to them. I'll say this one last thing and I'll be done, Mark. I have, again, I've said this in the past with our organization, such respect for those people in Gaza who then took to the streets, knowing full well that CNN don't give a damn, MSNBC doesn't give a damn, and they know full well that that protest, there was young man in Gaza about 2 years ago. He posted something negative about Hamas on his social media page. He was gone in less than 24 hours. The same thing happened in the West Bank. For those who think that the Palestinian Authority is much better, little bit, baby, ladies and gentlemen, not much, because there are journalists in the West Bank who will speak truth to power where Mahmoud Abbas is concerned, and they've been tortured and killed. Why do I know all these things? Because they are published, but not in the main press, right? You have to go to where some of these other writers are actually posting these things, giving you all the receipts. And then if you have the courage and the wherewithal, share those with other people. That's the way you educate other people what's going on.
Sasha, you had a question?
First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. And I would like to remind you that I was in my earlier days musician as well, and I appreciate what you are doing. And speaking about the contribution to American music, the Jewish artists such as Artie Shaw, Benny Goodman, Dave Brubeck, many others, they've done their great contribution to American jazz and American music, of course. And a lot of Israeli songs, and modern songs, not only modern, they are very well structured to provide a great feel for improvisation and for developing. And I'm doing that sometimes when I feel
Dave Brubeck, by the way, Dave Brubeck, who refused to play in segregated venues as well, and who would purposely bring black musicians in because he thumbed his nose at the whole. Absolutely, I have great respect for that man.
Absolutely, actually, the clarinetist Desmond, who played Take Five.
Yes,
right?
sir. Take Five, absolutely.
He was fantastic. I'd like to ask you a question. You mentioned a lot of people from countries like Tanzania, other African countries, that they moved to Israel and they're prosperous and they're citizens and so on. And there are 2 million Palestinians right now living in Israel, and they have all rights. They can vote, they can work, they have access to medicine, to just anything. I'm wondering what makes the Palestinians, for example, in Gaza, I'm not sure so much about West Bank, but at least in Gaza, because that's where this tragedy is happening right now. Yes, why they're not of the mind to maybe to learn something from Israel, at least technology, and maybe work there. Although Israelis did work permits for some of them,
yes, sir.
But to gain it. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down.
Yes, sir.
What's your opinion?
Well, thousands of them in terms of the work permits, to your last point. As a matter of fact, Israel increased the number of work permits for people coming from Gaza by several thousand over the last year. Tragically, some of those Gazans took advantage of that. Not all, some took advantage of that. And it was actually connected to this attack. They know because some of them had done reconnaissance on some of the kibbutz, right?
Oh, yes.
So here's the thing, and to Jadavi's point about here's the complicated nature of this. And this is what really, this where, again, why the work that we do, we try to focus on it as ardently as we can. There have been many studies that have done surveys of people of Gaza to ask them what their preferred political party was. And depending on which survey you point to, between 60 to 70% chose Hamas, right? Now, two things you need to understand about that. Number one, those surveys are pretty much done by other Palestinians. So if you're living in a dictatorial regime, they ask you what you think about the dictator. Unless you're an idiot, you're gonna say you think he's great, right? Or you're brave enough to not to blow it, right? Let's just be often in democratic society, we take so much advantage of that. I can say what I want about George Bush, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. I can talk about Donald Trump. I can say some of the nastiest things I want to, and freedom of speech lets me. I can get away say whatever. These people don't live there, right? They can't say that they Khaled Mashal as a man worth $6 billion who's stealing my international aid money. He needs to be sat down. They're not going to survive the day, right? So those surveys you also have to take with a grain of salt. Having said that, even if a vast majority of the people of Gaza prefer Hamas, two things I would submit to people. Number one, that means that some 30% do not, right? And that means number two, even if I voted for Hamas, right, that doesn't mean I don't have buyer's remorse. There's some folks voted for whoever their presidential candidate was, whatever country you live in, and you may have said to yourself, you know what? Nah, I want to take that back, right? So you have people in Gaza, whether they voted for Hamas or not, many of them are regretting. I submit to you, gentlemen, you can go on some of our social media. We have shared video that's captured from them speaking in Arabic, cursing Hamas, because what's happening, among other things, they are being escorted out. And this is not propaganda. You can Google, no, not Google it. I can send you the actual links, right? Because I say Google because it depends on what algorithm you're working with, right? IDF soldiers escorting people of Gaza to safer areas of Gaza while the fighting is happening. Now, ladies and gentlemen who are listening, this has been going on for years. This is not new. And Father, Israel's committing genocide. That's a sucky way to do genocide, right? Genocide means you just level the place. Why would you risk your own soldiers to escort innocent Gazan men, women, and children to safety? And what you're captured on these videos, these people are looking at the camera and basically saying, I'm a pastor, so I can't use certain language. Screw you, Hamas. This is your fault, Hamas. We hold Hamas accountable, right? They are doing this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm saying that to people who are listening, through threat of their own life. They know that if that video goes viral, it's not just me who's watching it. Hamas sees it. They see who these people are cursing them, right? And I'm saying, to your point, Sasha, that this is the reality. People apply for work permits from Gaza because the wages are better, the jobs are better. And let me preclude, that's because Israel keeps Gaza as an open air prison. These are some of the canards that unfortunately don't get unpacked. Those are by lazy thinkers. Yes, there's a blockade of Israel, of Gaza on the Israeli side, on the Egyptian side, and on the Mediterranean Sea. Why? Because Hamas is the ruler and they're shipping guns and weapons. You know, all those tunnels are made by concrete that's supposed to be used to build buildings for the Gazans, and you have thousands and thousands of feet of tunnels underground. And the people of Gaza are some of the poorest in the country, but their leaders are millionaires and billionaires. This is nothing new. Forbes printed about several years ago that Khaled Mashal, the head of Hamas, had a net worth, that was years ago, about $2.6 billion, is more than that now, and that Hamas is the third wealthiest terrorist organization in the world. Don't tell me that there's not resources for the Gazan people. It's being taken by, where I come from, we call those poverty pimps. The city council members and everybody else who got a lot of money, and the schools still suck, and there's no jobs, and the crime's through the roof, but they don't live in those neighborhoods. They live in gated communities. They're talking about defund the police and they got security, private security. We done seen that okie doke. See, I grew up, I've been black all my life. So I see the game that gets played, right? So when Hamas talk about, we want to enter the occupation and you worth hundreds of millions, you are alive. You don't want, you making money from the quote unquote occupation, you want it to end? Come on, dude. Who you think you're talking to, right? The occupation is paying your kids' college tuition. The occupation is paying for your mansions. Don't try that with me. I don't want to hear that, right? That's what's going on, and that's the reality of the people of Gaza.
Just really quickly, and I'm going to actually direct this toward, because Shaquille may have a question for you as well, but one of the things that you mentioned earlier was this notion, even within Pan-Africanism, of African Americans tying into Africa, whether that's the Middle East or whether that's other parts of Africa. So I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because I do have some friends that are in that space where they are trying to get some of our African American businesses to go into Africa and to invest in that space. Do you think that that is something that should be done, or is that something that you are a proponent of or not a proponent of?
Is that to me, Mark? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's to you.
Oh, no, we're actively pursuing that. We've been doing that for years. Along with the Israel Advocacy, our family actually runs a separate organization that does exactly what you say. The business and entrepreneurial connections between Africa and Israel, and between Black Americans and Africa, right? So some of my colleagues are people from Benin, in South Africa, in Kenya, and all over the continent who share this same vision, right? Whether they are Christians who stand with Israel, or whether they are actually working in business and entrepreneurial ventures where the Black American community is concerned. Often what people forget is that the wealthiest, most powerful people of the African diaspora are citizens of the United States of America. And that's the other point that I was making before, right? Through all the trials that we've been through, our African brothers and sisters often see us as superheroes, meaning we went through all that hell, and yet we still became leaders of industry, a president of the United States, all kinds of dignitaries and diplomats and those types of things. As a matter of fact, those of you who know your history, Frederick Douglass was the first U.S. ambassador to Haiti, right? So that's how far back our global vision goes, right? So what we do, Mark, to that point, sir, is that very thing, because it's economics that change people's lives. Rhetoric is one thing, but jobs and food on people's table, that's a different thing. So if people are seeing economic expansion and real entrepreneurial ventures between, for example, the Black American and the African communities, then they're seeing real life change on the ground. So we are very much in favor of that.
Shaquille, any thoughts? I know you're involved in business as well, so you've been hearing Dr. Washington or Mr. Washington. I don't know if you had any thoughts, or that Lee had any thoughts, as I have not heard from either one of you.
I won't comment on Africa for the moment. I'll just come back to the Israel-Palestine issue. So what I've continually said is, obviously we are seeing a rise in anti-Semitic violence in the Western world, as well as some rise in anti-Islamic violence, but I don't think that's acceptable in our societies. But I'm more concerned actually with what the solution is going to be, because I don't think that Israel or Palestine together are going to be able to come up with an agreement, because there's too much interference by the Arab world and the Western world. So I think that there has to be a solution brought about by the West, or by the world. What does that solution look like? I mean, clearly a two-state solution, you know, they've been talking about that for decades now. It seems like there's a lack of support for that now amongst both Palestinians and Israelis. People talk about a one-state solution. What is a potential solution, or what are the potential solutions that could, stop these sorts of conflicts from continuing to occur?
Well, what I would, I'm assuming, Shaquille, am I saying it correctly, sir? I'll make sure I'm adjusting. Yes, sir, absolutely. And I appreciate the question. My opinion, and our opinion as an organization, I would just push back a little bit on your premise, meaning I don't see the solution coming from the West. As a matter of fact, I think the United States has been a pretty consistently bad actor. Now, I get criticism of that from the other Americans, but I'm a big boy. I'll put on my big boy shorts every day, right? I'm looking at the administration, from the Bush administration to the Obama administration to the Biden administration. I have seen more harm than good done, right? So in other words, those of you who remember, several years ago, there was a press conference in which John Kerry, who was then the Secretary of State, I think he was then the Secretary of State, was relaying a conversation he had with the Israelis, right? 5, 6, 7, I can't remember what it was. It was during towards the tail end of the Obama administration, right? And he was sharing with people that the Israelis officials were pitching to him what we now know as the Abraham Accords. What were they saying? We think, they said, we can reach out to other members of the Arab world and begin to form more formal ties. I'm paraphrasing, right? And if you remember the very famous clip, he said, no. Right? His response to that, sitting in his ivory tower in the West, was telling Israelis and Arabs, you can't do that, right? This is what's been the problem. Yet, when the Abraham Accords did become a reality, and this started long before the Trump administration, there are people on the ground who have been talking about this for a while in Morocco, in the UAE, and Sudan, and other nations began to form formal diplomatic ties, nations that were formerly at enemies with Israel. Here is the thing, and I haven't said this yet, Shaquille, to the point that you're making about the problem. The problem is the most that it can't happen. I believe the peace can't happen. What does it have to do with the Palestinians? Well, it has to do, for example, with the fact that if we can agree, not you and me, but they can agree on the fact that much of the plight of the Palestinians is coming from their leaders. If we're going to have a real conversation about peace, if someone in Gaza can't even advocate, do you know that Hamas arrests people for even advocating peace? They call them collaborators. If they said something like we just said on this call, if they just said, I think that both sides need to, they don't play both sides Hamas. As soon as you say both sides Hamas means that you're working with the IDF. You're working with Mossad. That's how they read it, right? So that's already going to be the major problem. But here, I think that the most important part, which again, the West doesn't touch, the most bad actor there in the region is Iran. Iran is the one most invested in keeping the destabilization, not just destroying Israel, but those of you who know your geopolitics, Iran is after Saudi Arabia. Iran is after much of the other Sunni Muslim world, right? If there's one thing that much of the Arab world agrees with Israel, is that Iran is not to be trusted. Iran is the number one state sponsor of terrorism. We have all the receipts. Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, their main funding comes from the Iranian regime, not the people, the regime. If those things can be had, those conversations had honestly, and I'll say this last thing when I get off my soapbox, Iran, its economy was struggling until this U.S. administration came into power. Tens of billions of dollars released to the Ayatollahs, and they do with the money the same thing Hamas. They don't care about their people. I'm a Christian who's aware of the Christian world. The Christians are being persecuted in Iran just like they are in other very despotic regimes, even though Christians who know their history also know the Christian church is growing in Iran despite that type of persecution. Iran, Shaquille, I would submit, is the number one bad actor that both the Israelis and the Arab world have in common as a nemesis. I think those conversations have to be had honestly before we can really move forward.
Good point and everything. Lee, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just said, well, first of all, thanks for coming on Pi TV. It was a pleasure meeting you. You spoke about the long history Jews and blacks had with civil rights era, the NAACP, and various other things. Why is anti-Semitism so prevalent in the black community nowadays, given that?
And I appreciate that question. Thank you, Lee. And I actually addressed this in my book as well, Zionism in the Black Church. Again, not a plug, but I break this down. Yes, it has been measured by groups like the ADL, a couple others, that when it comes to anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic attitudes within different ethnic communities, it has registered somewhat higher in the black community than in others, right? There are many different reasons for that, much of which have nothing to do with the Jewish people. Some of it has to do with political realities, socioeconomic realities, those types of things, right? Which we don't have time to, I can unpack it more, but I don't want to take too much time with that. So the first answer to your question is that some of what we see that's anti-Semitism in the black community is the same anti-Semitism we see in other communities, but would register slightly higher in our community for some of those other reasons that have nothing to do with Israel or Jews, but have more to do with what's going on in some of these black communities, and maybe some of them being told that Jews are the reason. But I want people please understand who are listening to me, just like white supremacists are being told Jews are the reason, and other. So again, that kind of scapegoat thing happens in our community like anyone else's. But I would submit to you this as well, that the rise in anti-Semitism that we've seen, I think we can all agree, has been in all communities. I've watched the protests. They're Asian, they're Arab, they're black, they're white. right? It's amazing. The people who are supporting Hamas on the streets, waving not just Palestinian flags, ISIS flags, Hezbollah flags. Are you kidding me right now? Some of them were in Turkish Empire flags. I'm going, fool, do you know that the Ottomans beat down the Arabs? Well, do you even know what you're doing right now? You want to free Palestine, so go back to the Ottoman Empire, right? That's how stupid people are. I'm sorry, I got to be real, right? So again, what we're seeing, unfortunately, the Jew hatred is coming from the right side of the aisle, political aisle, the left side of the political aisle, neo-Nazis, Islamists, right? I often say this as a black preacher, the most universal hatred and the oldest one is Jew hatred because it takes all forms. You can be a far right, far left, you can be a communist, you can be a conservative. I don't care. If you've been sold the bill of goods that the protocols of the elders of Zion is real and that your problem is that the Jews, which a lot of people buy that stuff, which is another form of victimization. I tell my friends on the right, you guys keep talking about the folks on the left talking about victimization. Now you talking about pissing them off about the Jews did to you. You're doing the exact same thing, right? This is what we're seeing happening, Lee. It is, they used to say a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, the rise in anti-Semitism is everyone. It was already a little bit higher in the black community. All you've seen is this happen, right? That's what's actually going on. You're seeing it everywhere. It's just more prominent, it seems, to other people. And I want to say this too, particularly for the Jewish.
I'm going to have to run to the other show, but it was awesome to meet you, and I really hope that you're back with us again.
Oh, thank you, Shaquille. I'm sorry. Let me know if I got to stop.
You keep going. Plenty of time.
Go ahead.
I'll say I've been saying this to the Jewish community for the longest. The other reason why, Lee, it's more not just by substance, but by perception prominent. It goes right back to what I said before. There are such deep ties between the black and the Jewish community. It's like, Lee, I don't know if you're Jewish or not, but it'd be like you walking into a space in which there were people who were formerly your friends who are no longer your friends because you're a Jew. If those people were of multi-ethnic descent, it would hurt you. But if one of them was black and you understood how deep it would hurt you more. This is what I've submitted to rabbis all over the country.
You mean the lack of gratitude?
What's that?
The lack of gratitude.
Yes. Yes. And the lack of gratitude, the lack of acknowledgement of this. Those of you who've been listening, I talked about the fact that it was Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald who changed the world. They said there were millions of black folks who could not have access to education. But if it hadn't been for these men coming together, the money and the philanthropy of Julius Rosenwald, the brilliance of a Booker T. Washington, who Julius Rosenwald himself called him brilliant, these men came together and changed not just the United States of America, changed the world. They defined what civil rights looks like before the civil rights movement, right? For our Jewish friends, when they see someone black shouting anti-Semitism, it oftentimes cuts deeper because they'll say, wait a minute, we've been through hell and high water together, right? The three young men who were shot in the head and thrown into the Mississippi River, 2 of them were Jews. Are you guys kidding me? That's the difficulty now. And what did Dr. King say? In the end, it is not the words of our enemies that we'll remember, but the silence of our friends. This is what our Jewish brothers and sisters are experiencing.
Hey, Mr. Washington, just really quickly, we can go a little bit over and everything. I'm glad that Deidre McGee joined us because Deidre McGee was actually there in Israel at the time of that fateful October 7th attack, as my understanding and everything. And she was actually there on a religious mission. And I know you've gone on a number of religious missions as well. So Deidre, if you will just share a little bit and we'll go a little bit over. And like I said, I know that there are shows running parallel and everything, but if you will share a little bit about what you have been through, because like I said, when I heard about you and that you had been involved in your organization, and you can tell a little bit about that organization as well, but you were there literally on around the time of the October 7th attack, from my understanding.
Yes, I actually was. That was my 5th trip to Israel. 2 of them were for purely sightseeing missions, and 3 of them were working with International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. It's known as ICEJ.org. They've been there for many years, and they have been there as a Christian organization to support the Jews there, to let them know that many Christians support them greatly and love them. And I don't have a Jewish heritage. I even did a big research trying to find some Jews in my background, but I wasn't able to do that. But working with ICEJ, we come a week to 3 weeks ahead of time from the week-long celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles that they put on there. And it's attended by sometimes around 100, usually 80 to 90 nations. And then we do the preliminary to get ready for 6 days of wonderful worship and praise and support for Israel, and to march in Israel's March of the Nations, which comes during that time. And so I was scheduled to actually leave there October the 6th. And I moved my day so I could be there for the luncheon just for to help the volunteers to celebrate the time they'd had there together and have a little going away party before we left. So that morning I was packing to leave Israel that night about midnight, and which, jumping ahead, I did get to do barely. I was on the last flight that United had before they shut down service for some time to come back home. And that's a whole other story of how we finally ended up with that plane leaving, somewhat delayed, but not terribly. And the alarms went off about 8:30 and lasted until about 12:30, on and off. And of course, you probably all know that the alarm sounds, you go directly to the bomb shelter. Do not pass go. Do not stop on the way. Just go. There was no panic, none. And we were in a hostile area, staying at the Yitzhak Rabin hostel. So there were a lot of people there, including quite a few soldiers who had already left for their day's work by that time, but who do spend the nights there. So we would see them a lot at breakfast and dinner. And so we spent the morning back and forth. The alarm goes off. You have less than a minute that they give you to get there. And then if you don't hear anything else for 10 minutes, then you're free to go back. So we were bouncing back and forth from about 8:30 to 12:30. And then the bombs quit. Now, we heard many bombs incoming, but we did not hear any that exploded. That actually hit somewhere. There were, I understand, 15 at least missiles, bombs that came in during that time, but the Iron Dome did intercept all but one of those, and that one was allowed to hit because it was in an unoccupied area. So we would go down to the bomb shelters. In one large room, concrete room, bomb shelter, were the Christians who were there, mostly for that mission trip of volunteerism. In another room were the Jews that were there spending their Sabbath there, so that the moms didn't have to cook or anything. It's a normal habit of Jewish families, to many of them, to just spend every weekend at some place like a hotel or hostel. So there were many of those there. At one point, our Christian filled room was full, and so they sent me and 2 or 3 other people to the part that the Jews inhabited. And so I got the chance to see them. And in one section, it was partitioned off with a lattice partition. One section, of course, were the men, and the other the women. There was no panic there. There were no children crying. There were no wringing of hands. There was almost just a quiet awareness. Here we go again. But then as the morning went on, we could see that the mood didn't change to panic, but the mood became, I thought, a bit more somber, even on the Christian side, because we were beginning to realize this wasn't one of the occasional bombs that just came in. This was something different. We had no idea at this point about what had been happening at the kibbutz. No hint of it till I think really it was almost when it was over for us, before we realized that this had gone on elsewhere. And when we would hear the bombs, we would hear it like a Roman candle going off, this pow, pow, just an airy sound, not like something hitting concrete or something exploding into fire. So it was very somber time. There was no fear that I could sense. There was not a sense of fear, especially because I was mostly in the Christian side. Beautiful display of praise and worship and concern and care and seriousness, but not terror. not fear. Now, granted, we had not faced watching people be beheaded, shot into so many pieces they couldn't put them all back. We had not experienced that. So we can't say, unless we've experienced that somewhere else, what kind of fear we would have under those circumstances. But I do believe there is still a supernatural fear, supernatural peace that is in Jerusalem over all the people, Christian or not, that I don't experience it anywhere else in the world. There is a spiritual power in Jerusalem itself, in Israel, but in Jerusalem itself, that deserves to be studied and appreciated. And I said I sense a love for that area, not only the people, especially the people, but not only the people, but also the land. There's something, it's the only land that God said he himself would make his home and inhabit. You know, Jerusalem's it. So I pray that I get to go back. If I were sure I could help, I would try to go back now, but got a few little health issues have to take care of first. But you know, we can help by actually, those of us who are physically and financially able to go there, help them harvest the crops now, help them feed the soldiers, help them do whatever's needed. And I know of at least 4 organizations, some of which will even help pay the way for people to go. So I would encourage, you know, us to consider seeking to fill those spots, whether we can be the one to fill them or not, if we really want to bless the people of Israel, and not just them, but also our concern as Christians, those of us who are Christians. I know everyone isn't, but our deep concern now is for all the peoples, not just Israel. We want the Palestinians to be free, truly free. Let's free Palestine. Let's destroy Hamas. That's my take on it for right this minute. Thank you so much.
A quick question to you. You just mentioned to free Palestine and Palestinians and get them free and so on. And what's happened is, as you know, that in 2005, Israel left Gaza. They say, we are leaving, we are no longer there. Build second Singapore or whatever else you want to build, just go ahead, do it. That's the end of the story. So essentially, that was a point where they could have their own government, their own country, build a new society. And, well, you know what's happened and you know where we are. And what's, nobody talks about it, I noticed, that the whole idea of existence of Israel is that after horrible Holocaust, the Jews started to arrive to Palestine, and United Nations came to the decision to have a Jewish state. Okay, so here is a Jewish state. And the idea of Jewish state was to protect all Jewish people, regardless they're coming from Europe or from America or from Africa or from any other country, to protect them, to have their home. Now, what's happened on October 7th, that was destroyed. Israel doesn't have home anymore because any terrorist, well-financed organization, whether it's Hamas or whether it's Hezbollah, they can penetrate, kill untold amount of people there. So there is no any more perceived protection of the Jews in the country of Israel. Mm-hmm. Now, with that and with the rise of the anti-Semitism in Europe and also in America, there is no safe harbor for Jews here either. So this what happened on October 7th. And when it comes to responsibility, there is a cry that Palestinian people, you're killing innocent people who are hiding the Hamas. criminals. They're hiding behind innocent civilians in Palestine. And it was just published pictures that there were the weapons hidden under the hospital, which Israel invaded. They showed the pictures. And there was also the horrible story with this bombardment of hospital, where supposedly hundreds of peaceful Palestinians were killed. And then the story went down that it was not Israelis. It was Islamic Jihad
Yes.
whistle. And yet it took the fire on all the anti-Semitic media and so on. So this is one of the assessments, what I just said, of what exactly happened on October 7th.
Yes. May I explain a little bit? When I say free Palestine, I do not mean set them up as a nation. Freedom for the Palestinians, in my very limited understanding of world events, but they could never be freer than if they would submit to Israeli authority as their governing body, but not as their boss. You know, when they were never freer, probably, I mean, I don't know about never, but their freedom won't come in being turned over to the Palestinian liberation, because they're not liberators, in my opinion. Their agenda is totally different from what their name suggests. Freeing the Palestinians, in my mind, would be giving them the freedom to work and to live in peace and to decide for themselves what God they'll serve, and let them have their families and have a life, a true life, not somewhere where they have to pretend they believe something they don't, or they are not even free to try to determine what they really do believe. Give them exposure, give them freedom to live and work and raise their families and make a decent living and have life and have an abundant life. And that's what many of the Palestinians have in Jerusalem, in Israel, excuse me. Many of the Palestinians, many of the Jews are working hard to give the Palestinians a good life, to provide jobs for them, and those to live with them. Many of the Palestinians want freedom. Those that don't, I believe some of the people that dwell there, the Hamas, many of those have reprobate minds. There is nothing that's going to change them. They have killing, they have murder, they have hate, and that's all they have. Look at the demonstrations. The demonstrations for Palestine, in their terms of freeing Palestine, those demonstrations were ugly, mean, full of hate, wouldn't listen to other people. Look at what happened in Washington, D.C. last Sunday when the 300,000, or was it last Sunday or Sunday before, but 300,000 people got together. And from what I understood, days after that, people even in the nail salon, someone on Fox News said they were in the nail salon, one of the ladies, and all they could talk about was how beautiful the march was, how peaceful, how happy, how encouraging, how kind the people were when they made contact with the other people around. So we're looking at a whole different mindset, a mindset that is one that seeks peace and is willing to fight for it, and another one that wants war and wants to kill and destroy and hate. And so it's an ideology. It's not the individual human. It's the ideology that's there that has to be dealt with. And sometimes the only way to get rid of cancer is to cut it out and destroy it and make it such that it can't come back. And you know, when we have cancer removed, they also take out some good cells, not because they want to, because it's the way it is.
Hey, Ms. McGinn, we'll get ready to wind down. I'm glad you were able to join, and I do know that you've always got a question and everything, but I know that you have an organization, or you're part of an organization that seems to be about having conversations across the board and even finding some ways that you can find some commonality among different kind of groups and all along those lines. So if you can tell me a little bit about Reaching for Life, because it does sound like that organization is one that is, while it is a Christian organization, does reach out to some of the Jewish community, some of the Muslim community, and other communities as well. So it does seem like it's an organization that is about, for lack of a better term, having some unified conversations and finding that common ground.
Well, actually, Reaching for Life is not that organization. I'm sorry. I probably didn't make that clear as we visited a little bit beforehand. Reaching Life is a simple, very small nonprofit here in Southeast Arkansas. And we deal in the U.S. and we deal with trying to help children learn the basics of reading and writing. But we also do and have planned in the future some programs where we try to bring people, especially our children, to understand the cultures of other lands.
Right.
And to understand even the different cultures within even the state of Arkansas, but certainly within the United States, to bring our communities together to help people understand the beauty of diversity instead of the problems in diversity. If we could see, just as in music, how sad it would be if we had only one note on the piano. If we had only Elvis as our person of music to relate to, if we had no opera, if we had only Asians in the world, how sad that would be, and how limiting, and how beautiful it can be when we do reach out. So that is, Mark, that is where we would like to head in the future. We're just a tiny organization now, all volunteers, just a handful of us. But that is a vision that we have talked about, that we would love to. And maybe you're suggesting that, and me giving you a misunderstanding of it was a way for that to bring that back into our mind and to refocus on doing that. I'm meeting with a group of ladies from a nearby church today to tell them about what's going on. And we can, they certainly would be close enough to help us with that. So thanks for the great idea.
No problem at all.
That.
Jacoby, you had a question? Because definitely Ms. McGee was there, experienced some of that experience on days before it happened.
I guess my question, and I guess it would tie back to the question I asked Mr. Washington earlier, in the sense of that whole the idea of that collective punishment, that collective idea that 30 people here represent 2 million, or the acts of 100 people represent 2 million, and so on and so forth. Is there, because I understand in your mind that a separate state or a two-state solution, which has always been suggested, is a poor idea, and that the true freedoms, because I think we all want that for the Palestinian people, because that humanity and that is what we all seek, for the Israelis to live peacefully, the Jewish individuals to live peacefully, the Palestinian people to live peacefully, the Arab nation, and I think one of the it's tough, because one of the issues that I think some of the and it's probably propaganda from being pushed from the Palestinian Authority, potentially the same thing with Hamas and everything, about the occupations and the individuals that are there being removed from their homes. I mean, there's some issues there, and it's tough for, I guess, to say that the Palestinians will truly be free if they're living up under the Israelis or Israeli authority, or Israel, and have them up under that, even though that you're saying that they can decide on whomever they want to, pray to. But is there, and this is, I guess, the reaching across and having discussions, and those tough discussions and those honest discussions, is there a way, because terrorism and all the other things, that money that's there that causes an issue, and keeping people ignorant is what makes terrorism easier, because if the people in Palestine see this person waving a gun and will kill me, and this person waving a gun that'll kill me, the old saying, I'm gonna stay with the devil that I know and not try the devil that I don't. So how do we change from being viewed as a devil by the individuals that, if we want to talk about the histrionics, there hasn't been an election since Hamas came into power, and half of the country never got to elect Hamas.
Right.
So, trying to tie all the Palestinian people to Hamas, or that they have this view, and which Dr. Washington pointed out beautifully. I mean, you're living in an area where if you say anything against them, you're shot dead within 24 hours. You're gone. Even in the polls and everything, yes, you have to be an idiot to say, well, the Hamas is bad, I don't want them. Okay, well, you're gone. So you have to agree to these things, and there are a lot of individuals, as was pointed out earlier, that marched in the streets that do not want Hamas. They protested against them without even having the cameras around them, the protection of the people that that the camera allows you. They don't have that, so I guess I say all this to bring it back to, how do we bridge that gap and become the individual that they can reach out to and be free in a society that they feel is theirs, that they feel that this land is mine. And we can talk about the histrionics behind it and all the history there. I mean, since Hamas has been in power, five major wars, basically a flare up like this every 3 years. Even people dying on a regular basis, and Hamas using individuals as human shields. How do we break that collective view from the Palestinian people that it's not Hamas who's killing me, it's Israel who's killing me? How do we get through that mindset so then the individuals reaching across, hey, you can have your land. Let's work together to make that land the best it can be, instead of, hey, I'm going to bomb you the same way you bomb me.
Mm-hmm. Well, personally, I think that's a question way above my pay grade, as they say, because I think the whole many multitudes of people are dealing with that now. And I think that's the key question for after the war. But in my mind, I tend to, at this stage, think more of what people actually do than what they say they're going to do, especially with our elected officials. So if I come in and I say, now the war is over, I'm going to help you rebuild your home, I'm going to help you do this and that and the other, and get you back a livable, beautiful place here like Israel has become in the last 75 years. And I'm going to help you to stand on your own 2 feet and have a good life. Now, let me show you how. And then they proceed to do that. Then with time, that has changed. And with the absence of these forces that could come in at any moment and kill you if you don't go along with what they say, think about these people that have been pushed out of their homes. Many of them wanted to leave way before they could. They recognize who kept them from leaving. And with time, they will recognize who wants to help them have a good life too. And in that time span that's needed, there has to be a governmental authority that can that can oversee this and can be sure that it happens without them being shot dead if they disagree, as they go through the days and the months and years ahead and see that there is no retribution for them speaking their minds, that they can speak against Israel, not treacherously, not as traitors, but they can speak against the way things are happening, and they're not shot, they're not killed, their children can play in the streets safely. There has to be that measure of parental control for a while until they grow up into a life of peace and a life of seeking good for the family, for seeking the good things. And these cancers that are people who have such spirits that they don't want this to happen, they want to keep chaos. They have to be kept out of the country. They can't be allowed to infiltrate the money and take. Just think what life these people in Gaza would have if all the millions of aid that's gone to them had gone to them and not to building tunnels. What if these tunnels didn't exist and this ant-like living situation that they put under there, all of that money was spent in the hopes of getting out and killing Jewish people? What if it's all spent toward doing good, toward giving them homes and providing them food and helping them have good jobs and growing great agriculture there? Their land could prosper and be fruitful also. So
And
it's a very complicated question, but I think the thing for me is that I would just encourage people, get out there, study, learn the facts, and then stand up for what you believe in. If you believe you need to be out marching for Palestine, go right ahead. But on that issue, I also believe in the 80-20 rule, that it's pretty well applicable across the board to most things. I think 80% of those marchers represent 20% of the people. I don't think they represent 80%. I think 80% of the Christians people represent 80% of the Christians that are there for Jerusalem, that are for peace. We're not saying Jerusalem's perfect and they've done everything right. We're saying we're for peace. We're for them to be allowed to live in peace. And if they have to undergo surgery, deep surgery, in order to be whole for the rest of the body, then it's necessary. It's good. It's painful. It's difficult, but it's good, and it's the right way.
I would like to mention, Dr. Thank you so much, that the position of many people today is that, okay, here are Palestinians over here. Here is a Hamas over there. It was Hamas who attacked Israelis, so this Palestinians over here, they're completely innocent, and even one death is not justified. I would like to mention, though, that it's been documented in video and other documents that, in fact, Palestinians were part of the heinous attacks on October 7th. They were dancing on the streets of Gaza when Holocaust survivor, 82 years old woman, was brought in wheelchair from one of the kibbutz that she founded 50-some or even 60 years ago. She was brought to Gaza. People were dancing on the street and singing. It was not Hamas who was dancing and singing. It was Palestinians. So the whole purpose, if you understand the history of modern Israel, that all the Arab countries, they didn't want to do anything with Palestinians. No country would allow them to come and live. And there are so many wealthy Arab states that they could easily solve this Palestinians' problem. No one wanted to take them. Why? Nobody needs Palestinians working for some wages in their countries. No, they don't need them. They need them right there on the border with Israel, so they could attack Israel once a year, once a month, maybe once a week, and make Israelis' life as miserable as possible. That's the only point of existence of Palestinians. There is no other.
I have to push back again, Sasha. You cannot throw everything on the Palestinian people.
Bye-bye.
And this is the rhetoric that I think creates a problem, because just as Dietrich, the experience that you went through, and everybody else that went through what happened on October 7th, that was an atrocity. That was something that everyone condemns, and that is the right way to be. I mean, we got to push back on that kind of. We have to push back on, hey, this happened. So all Palestinian people must die. And I cannot, that's something that I cannot.
Jacoby?
He literally just said
Jacoby?
their only existence was to cause Israelis problems. That's what he said. That's his words. So he's saying that the Palestinian people's only existence is to cause Israelis issue, so they must die. That is his words. That
just
is
really quickly,
wrong.
Jacoby. Really, I agree
Mark,
with
I
you
just
that
had a
that's
question
wrong.
for Jacoby,
And just really
since we have a
quickly,
guest
Jacoby,
here.
I would come back to what Deidre just said, because I do think that 80-20 rule is very right, that there are some people that have a very minority view, and we don't need to think that that is the majority view. And I think that that's what Miss McGee was saying, and everything is that is a minority view, that is not the majority view, and all along those lines. And I agree with her and everything. The other thing that I would push back to some degree that Sasha said, because I was doing some research and some reading, is that yes, while there was, and I'm just going back in history and everything, while there was that, when Israel was created, yes, those Arab nations did come and attack Israel and everything, but people forget that there was actually a preemptive strike. And for whatever reasons, you can say that it was justified or not, but there was a preemptive strike that actually started the 6 Day War. And that was actually Israel launching an attack against Syria and Egypt. So they actually launched the attack first. And they did say it was preemptive. So they were trying to stop something that they perceived was going to happen. It hadn't happened yet. They did a preemptive strike.
Yes, and I think that's not necessarily wrong, because what do we do? I'm great on analogies. What do we do with our body? If we sense something is very dangerously wrong, we go and we get it checked out. And if we find like it's cancer, we might remove a whole organ because before it gets into that area, because it's going to spare the rest. That we cannot call any nation and say every one of its people are this or that, because we cannot do that. We can understand, though, that there are nations of people that tend to raise these types of people. That doesn't mean they're all that way, though.
Right.
Exactly. And that's, I think, where my point is. And that's why I always have to push back when he goes down that pathway. Because, I mean, again, we all want the same thing. But we cannot. I mean, if we're all about the sanctity of life, if we all,
Jacoby?
hey, what you got?
Not everybody in the world wants the same thing. Can we agree with
I
that?
get that. I'm talking about us here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm confused about
And then,
is, Jacoby, I'm sorry. One thing I'm confused about, we have a guest here today, and she pointed out the difference between the rally in Washington for Israel and a lot of the rallies for the Palestinians. The nature of them was vastly different. Why is that?
you have anger. So that's easy. So like the pushback that I'm pushing against Sasha, everybody here was talking about how
I get why you're pushing about Sasha, because Sasha's saying
I'm trying to give you an
100%. I get
example
why
of
you're pushing back.
Yeah, I'm giving you the example and using this, what's happening here, as an analogy to why the hostility and the anger and the angst from those and some of the Palestinian, the Palestine protests.
Right.
Because, for example, here we've talked about a lot of, okay, what happened to the Israeli people is wrong. What happened on October 7th was wrong. What Dietrich went through was wrong. All these things are wrong. And then as soon as we say, hey, what's going on with the Palestinian people themselves, we have somebody turn around and say the Palestinian people should be are all cancerous and should be killed. Even though that Dietrich and I just agreed that what Sasha keeps referencing, the people dancing in the streets, that doesn't represent all the Palestinian people.
I get that. In our previous guest here, I'm trying to even point it out.
I'm getting to your answer.
They're putting their lives on the line.
I'm getting to your answer. Let me finish. So when you have everybody in agreement and everybody harmonious here, talking about the Israeli people of this, Israeli people deserve this, and we should find the hostages, and we should be working towards the peace of Israel, and we should be able to the Israelis should be able to defend themselves. But then you get anger in the same harmonious group that was so harmonious about the Israeli people, but then you get a dispute over, well, the Palestinian people, so you get that feeling that from those in those pro-Palestinian movements that feel like everybody's against them. Nobody can even agree that the Palestinian people aren't Hamas. You have people on this show that actually say that Hamas and the Palestinian people are the same. But why? And that's where the agitation comes from the pro-Palestine rallies. Is we're just trying to fight. They're just like, I haven't even been to one. I'll go ahead and say that. I've watched them and I've read the news and I've tried. I haven't been to one. I haven't been to a pro-Israel one. But again, I'm for both. I want the same thing for the Israeli people as I want for the Palestinian people. The peace and freedom that Dietrich talked about. And
yes, but Tony, we have to understand that there is a spirit within certain groups of people, not judging them individually,
but
as groups, there is a spirit. Look at the difference. Do you think we're not angry? Do you think that those of us who support Israel are not angry? We are angry, but let me finish. We are angry inside. We are hurting inside, but we express that in ways that we are trying to reach for love. We express that not by hating other people. Hamas, they have the spirit of Amalek within them, of the nation of Amalek from years past in history. And that spirit is one that says, if you don't do what I want to, I have a right to kill you, and I'm going to enjoy it.
But Dietrich, you just did the same thing that I just talked about. And which is why the Palestinian people, those marches get so emotional. Because again, I'm talking about the pro-Palestinian people or the people fighting for Palestine. And you brought in, well, this is Hamas, the spirit of Hamas. That's not the Palestinian people.
That's not what these people think we have the same anger?
I'm not
Do you not
saying
think we
that.
have the
You're not,
same
no,
anger inside?
Dietrich, wait. I am not saying that you don't have the same anger. I am not saying that you don't have the same passion, the same care, the same love. I am not saying that at all. I'm saying that you have that love. I'm saying
how
that
do we
you have that
express it?
passion.
How
I'm
do we
saying that you
express
even
it?
no, listen, wait, Dietrich. I'm saying that you express it in your way. And you get the welcome open arms. But even now, I'm saying that the pro-Palestine people, the people that are marching, and you just said that you were agitated. They're agitated. You just
Not
said
agitated. No, I didn't say that.
Okay, you were angry. They are angry.
At the sin, at the wrong, not at the people.
Let me finish. You are angry. They are angry. You are marching. They are marching. You are speaking. They are speaking.
No, they are yelling.
Again, I'm in the middle of trying to explain to you, and what do? You yell over top. Wait. You yell over top. You speak over top to tell me what they are doing. When I'm trying to tell you what they are doing.
You're telling me what I'm doing. There's a difference. Go ahead. I will be quiet and listen. Go.
Again, both are marching for the peace of a people. Both are angry at what went on. One gets accepted with open arms. That's the point.
How is the other accepted? How do you accept with open arms someone that desecrates the Capitol? They have a right to march. I have no problem with them marching, but they do not have a right to infringe upon the lives and property of other people to the point of destroying it. They are listened to. They're on the news.
Nobody's advocating for destruction. What they are advocating. No, listen to what I'm saying.
They vandalize property.
Listen to what I'm saying. Nobody is advocating for destruction. What they're advocating for is for you to listen. But every time they get told, oh, well, you are evil. Just as Sasha pointed out, every Palestinian, the only reason that the
No, I'm
Palestinian
not saying
people,
that.
I'm telling you, that's what Sasha just said.
Sasha does not speak for me. Sasha does not speak for most
But
of the
when
people.
I talk about the pro-Palestinian people rallies, you brought up Hamas. Lee, you've done that in the past. So you're both saying that Hamas speaks for the pro-Palestinian people.
Joby, I
No.
tried to say before, Dumasani was here today. We had a guest today, specifically said there are Palestinians who get their heads chopped off if they speak up. There are journalists in Gaza if they speak up. Obviously, not all Palestinians
And
support
that's the
Hamas.
point. So when these pro-Palestinian
But what
marches happen,
I'm waiting for is a peaceful pro-Palestinian
there have been many
rally.
of them.
I haven't seen them.
There
You're
have
not
been
You've
many
not
of
seen
them,
the
and they're
Jews for you've not
happening.
seen the Jews for peace organization.
Jews
There's
for
actually a Jewish
Palestine.
group that is very peaceful and everything. It is supporting Palestine. It is
Yeah.
a Jew. I'm trying to think of the name of the group, but I know it's Jewish Voice for Peace or something like
I'm
that.
waiting
But
for
it
a
is
Palestinian, pro-Palestinian
They are
parade
there,
that's very
Lee.
peaceful in
Lee.
America.
Lee, just
I haven't
as
seen-
you pointed back
pro-Palestinian.
to,
It is a
just as
pro-Palestinian
you
group.
pointed back to Mr. Washington, who was just here, and he talked about how the media didn't cover how Boko Haram was doing the genocide and
I
everything
heard all
else,
that. Right,
and
I
all
get
these
that.
things. But you're asking the media to cover a peaceful pro-Palestinian march, and you're
Maybe
saying
I'm
that it's not
naive.
there.
Maybe I'm naive with the media. You're right. That's a valid point. I agree with you there. The
So
media has
that
their
is
agenda.
all I'm saying is
Why
that
wouldn't
they
they
are there.
support?
What?
Jatobi, why wouldn't the media support a peaceful
It's
pro-Palestinian
not
march?
money.
There you go. There you go.
So again, we can't sit here and argue and say that there hasn't been, because there has. And we know for a fact that a lot of the media covers a lot of the outrageous stuff because it brings eyes and draws eyeballs. So therefore, a lot of the media that we see isn't truly everything that's going on. So again, when you started off by, and this is again, Dietrich, you agreed, the 80-20 rule. So that 80% that's out there marching doesn't even represents what, 20% of the Palestinian people. So therefore, we can't say that all the Palestinian people. Earlier, Dr. Washington talked about how, again, if you speak out, you're killed. He even stated that there are links showing the marches that happened before, and the cameras weren't even there, and that was covered. So there are Palestinian people that are marching and looking for help. But again,
Yes.
even on this discussion here, both of you guys, one stated that, hey, there isn't a pro-Palestinian march that isn't violent. The other kept getting agitated because I'm just trying to say, well, if we
And
want
by the way,
that
I know we're winding down, and I
But you don't wanna
appreciate
cross
both
the
guests and
line.
everything. But
Mark,
one
we got
thing
to
I was
pick up
going
this
to
show.
say, just
This is
to
one of your
put
best
some-
shows in the top 10 of
put
the
some
year.
clarity and everything, is the group is called the Jewish Voice for Peace. They have done several protests in New York. They've done protests in DC and everything. Their page actually says, I'm actually looking it up on the phone, Jewish Voice for Peace is the largest progressive Jewish anti-Zionist organization in the world. We're organizing a grassroots, multiracial, cross-class, intergenerational movement of U.S. Jews into solidarity with the Palestinian freedom struggle. If you've been looking for a political home for Jews on the left in this perilous moment, if you've been wanting a Jewish community with justice at the center, if you've been looking to turn your rage and grief into meaningful, strategic action, join us. You belong here. So that is actually a group that I know that has done protests. A lot of them have been sit-ins and kind of movement.
And
Similarly,
Mark, we should
you
have
heard
them on
Dr.
the
Washington
show.
talk about King. They've done some of those King type protests and everything.
And
Bring
it's
them on
just
the
one of
show.
those-
Huh?
It's just one of those
Bring them on the
things.
show as a guest.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to get to them as well.
It's just one of those things. My whole point is that, and Dietrich, we can agree because this is one of the things that you do in terms of using your organization to reach out and talk to other individuals. I mean, that's a group looking for help, looking for somebody to talk to. Just as anybody gets frustrated, we get agitated. The only thing is, they could have an evil spirit, but I mean, you can have an evil spirit change. If we don't allow people to change, then why are we all? Then we're just going to constantly fight over and over. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And if we keep going back and forth, everybody's blind, and everybody's going to have. We can talk about destroying an ideology, and this goes back to how if the fight to destroy Al Qaeda, you know, when we went after Al Qaeda, which yes, we went after Al Qaeda and we thought we squashed them. Guess who popped up? ISIS. It's an ideology. There is an evil that happens, yes, but we've got to fight it in a different way because we keep, I mean, yes, Hamas, terrorist organization, and we all agree that, but the Palestinian people, if we constantly keep killing the Palestinian people that didn't even have a voice to vote the Hamas in and can't even speak out against Hamas, all we're doing is creating more hatred of Israel. And then
so
that
just really
hatred
quickly as we get
turns
ready
back
to wind
around,
down and
and
everything,
then-
and this is actually a question for
Right.
Deidre, because I've had some folks that have been on various shows, including some of my own shows and everything. I remember years ago, and I don't remember when it was probably almost a decade ago, watching either Ted Koppel or Peter Jennings, and they were doing a conversation around religion. You got a gentleman who's very adamant about it. He has said that he is Jewish. I actually consider myself more spiritual than anything else. I think that Joby is Christian, if I remember correctly. You're definitely Christian and all along those lines. But what this particular anchor, and I think it was an ABC anchor, it might have been Ted Koppel or it might have been Peter Jennings, their premise of the argument or the premise of the discussion was that there are tons of religions in the world, and while there are certain religions that may believe it is their way is through their profit or whatever, the core principles are the same and everything. And that's what I've been arguing for years, is that a lot of the core principles are the same, and we can disagree on the methodology, and we can disagree on whether it is a minor profit or a major profit. But I was just wondering, as a Christian woman, do you find that, and I don't know whether you have Muslim friends or Jewish friends or other friends, that a lot of the principles around life are very similar?
Some of the principles are the same. I think I could agree to that in pretty much every religion. But if the premise of your religion is that because your religion is a certain type, it is the only right one, and I have the right to kill everyone else. There's where our big differences come in between that and the Muslim extremist. Every Muslim doesn't believe that. I've had some fantastic conversations with especially taxi drivers. In fact, had a wonderful one with a man trying to get home from on October 6th, trying to get back to my place from the old city. And there were, as you might recall back then, there were so many extra millions of people who were there visiting during the Feast of Tabernacles time. And so it was very, very, very crowded. Lots of the streets closed off, and you had to walk a long way just to find a taxi. Wonderful conversations, one with the man of the Muslim faith, and he was adamant that that it was a religion of peace. And I think it is for many people. I would love to have some close Muslim friends that I could talk with who were not extremists, because I don't think you can be friends with someone who thinks that they're serving their God the best if they kill you. But the ordinary Muslim person, I'd love to have as a friend.
But to that point and everything,
there are some
because you live in,
important.
but to that point, you live in Arkansas, and I think that even Mr. Washington alluded to it earlier as well. There are some Christian nationalists that are part of like some of the very racist groups and everything, and they are just as bad as some of the Muslims and everything in that sense, and all along those lines. And that is part of what goes on as well, because there is definitely a strong group of people, particularly in the Deep South, that are very much part of that Christian nationalist community. And I don't think that they are any better than those extreme Muslims as well. So I think that they're extreme on all sides of the political line.
I agree, because those are not truly Christian groups. If you see the Christian faith, and the extremists may not be Muslim. I've only read a little bit and studied a little bit about the Quran, but there are some things in the Quran that are very pointedly, they do say that. So
in all religions have their own. If people have bastardized every religion to create an extremist group,
yes,
the Klan uses the Christian faith to justify their killings and their subjugation of Black people. So every religion has their extremist group. Yes, even in the Bible, there's even talks. There's Passover is a celebrated holiday where they killed the firstborn. So it's one of those things that every part has its bad part, but religion within itself, be it the Islamic faith or the Christianity, everything has a beautiful piece, and that's what we should be focused on. And that's where, that's where you find your peace, be it in religion, be it in science, be it whatever. That's a necessary thing in society today, is being able to utilize something to find peace within yourself so you can help others and create a beautiful society that we all want. That utopian thing is something true. Yeah, we can't reach it, but it's something that we can always work towards to get there. And that's,
Well, I would have to say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I would have to say that Passover is not a celebration of the firstborn dying. Passover is a celebration of the freedom that God granted to Israel to finally get to go to the promised land that he gave to them through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, through Abraham, through the seed of Abraham. So we have a common heritage even with the Muslim as far as going back to Father Abraham. And we can celebrate that together. And then we can study, we can study the Torah. We can just limit the Torah. And I still see Jesus there. If you don't, then, you have that right. God gave you the right to
That's
choose
very
your
much true.
own.
And
religion.
even one of our founders has brought up some of the things in the Torah that can be justified, just like the Bible was used to justify slavery. There are things in the Torah that can be used to justify things that are not considered very much humane, for lack of a better term, and everything that are in the Torah. I think there's a whole thing around whether in certain parts of the Torah they go against the Gentiles and all along those lines. And that could be a whole conversation that people could take that to the extreme.
It's just one of those things that we have to realize that we have much more in common. Religion, even though there are separations and their beliefs separate, Muslims believe this, or those of the Islamic faith believe this, Christians believe this. But you know what? We all hate the Yankees. So, there are so many things that we can connect on, so many more things that we connect on. And yes, if you use religion as to find that centerpiece, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. The humanity is what we should all be, all focused on, regardless of your faith. Somebody being injured, a child being harmed, should hurt you by your soul. It shouldn't be something that we say, okay, well, that's collateral damage. No, it's something, hey.
Do you think that's what they're saying? That's certainly not what I'm saying.
No. I don't think it's
not what I'm
just using that as I'm just saying that just happens. There are some people that do say that. And that's the sad thing. And so that's what I'm saying. And us three here can agree that, it's something that hurts seeing that.
Yeah.
And that's the humanity that we love, that we want to see, is that I want you to feel pain, the same pain that I feel when I see that happen, so we can relate and work towards a greater goal that this doesn't happen.
But if you don't want to work toward that goal, if your mindset is you're not working toward that goal, then we can't work together. And that's where we butt heads with those who their goal is to destroy the Jewish people. So there's so many topics here. We could go off on a bazillion tangents.
And even in that, I think there's still we have to push through that wall and not allow that one barrier to stop us from helping others. And it's easy, and it's easy to, well, they're not going to do it, so I'm not going to work with them to do it. I gotta keep, for me, I gotta keep talking. I gotta keep pushing. And this is why, like, Sasha gets mad at me all the time every time I go at him about it. I don't care that, you keep saying no, I'm not going to allow you to do that, because regardless of, you having that evil heart towards this individual that's a civilian, I can't let you do that. I can't let them be harmed, because you yelling about it, it gets out on the internet, it gets out, and it gives somebody else the idea that, okay, well, I've got to harm them. No, somebody still has to speak.
Where are you speaking up? And this is just because I don't know you before this morning, but where are you speaking up for the heart of the 1,200 Israelis that were viciously? How could anybody do that to another human being? one.
I speak up for anybody in that oppressed state, in that abused state. I speak up for anybody, from the Israelis to the Jewish individuals to the Christians. It doesn't matter to me.
So what is your
faith you have.
response? What would
What-
you choose as your response to the Hamas? I'm talking about true Hamas, not
Yeah.
the Palestinian people.
Just as,
What would your solution be for Israel to do against the Hamas, whose one goal in life, and they say that according to them, not according to Israel, their one goal is to destroy Israel, and they have already done it to a great extent without regard for human life. These were all innocents. Nobody's not a good word to use anywhere, is it? Because that's too all inclusive. But so many people are now speaking up for the innocents here. If you, I had my kids, I was in a history class sharing with them about what's happening in Israel, and I had them hold up their hand. And I said, in each finger, put someone you love. So I would just ask you to do that. Place someone you love on those fingers. Now, use your pointer. All the rest of them died. Are you over that yet? So we cannot forget the pain Israel is going through in the midst of all this. And from what I've seen, videos from the soldiers, those soldiers don't want to be there, but they do want to protect their country.
again, I will speak in my, I've said this multiple times on this because I've got questioned on that over and over, and it still hasn't changed. And again, what happened over on October 7th, the people that you're talking about, the many that have been killed, I cannot, if in that position of power, cannot ignore the fact that 10,000 plus Palestinians have died. So you're talking about 10-fold more have died on the Palestinian side. So again,
an eye for 10 eyes or 10 eyes for one eye. It's not
a matter of keeping score. You asked me a question you want me to answer?
It was a rhetorical question. I know you wouldn't say it's 1 for 10. At least I didn't think you would.
No, but I mean but see, even that jab, or that rhetorical question, it minimizes the lives that have lost in the whole thing. No, listen. Listen. I'm not saying that's what
I'm
you're
disagreeing.
doing. I'm not saying, yes, I know. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing. But what I'm saying, even that retort, it still minimizes the situation and the casualty count that is there. Because yes, each count is a life. Each count, as I stated, I don't care what religion the individual is. I don't care. That life is gone.
Yeah,
that's what I care about.
That life is gone. I definitely agree. And to tell me real quick, because we definitely gone way over and everything. But one of the things I would argue and everything just really quickly is that there is some notion that some people, and you can disagree with me, DJ, but there are some people that would argue that in a lot of ways, even though we don't want to admit it, that both the far right, and there are some people that say that there is a far right Israeli government, and the Hamas themselves, while they are having massive casualties, that they may have in some ways actually won their military objectives. Because when I've listened to interviews from Hamas has actually said that this is what they wanted. They actually wanted this kind of this evil and this conversation to go on and everything. So that is actually the reason that they launched the attack. They actually felt that they would die in the process and maybe even become martyrs in the process. But I've heard interviews where they literally said that no, they did not expect to win. They did not expect that there would not be a backlash. They definitely, in some ways, this was their way of killing something that they didn't want, which was the two-state solution and everything. So they actually felt that was going to be what was going to happen when they launched the attack. They actually knew that this was going to be the reaction of the West.
And just to point out, just to answer your question real quick, Dietrich, on how you said what I would do, because that Mark just pointed out exactly one of the things that I would do. Because yes, Hamas they're an agitator. They are a terrorist organization. Their goal, Yes, they want to keep the area destabilized. Netanyahu actually gave money to Hamas because they knew that Hamas was their goal was similar to his goal, keeping it destabilized, because then Israel can say that there's no chance for a two-state solution and no chance for a peace. So they still have to remove these people from Gaza and continue on this occupation, which is also part of the problem. So in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I mean, yes, a two-state solution is one of those things. And going after Hamas. Yes, we have to go after Hamas, take out Hamas. I agree with that. But my reaction to going after Hamas isn't the same where I'm bombing, where it feels indiscriminately because you dropped 6,000 bombs in 7 days. So yes, Hamas is using innocent civilians as human shields. That's a problem. So how do you get around that? You got to come up with some type of tactical means to do that. You know they're in tunnels. So how do you get around that? So there has to be a bigger plan rather than going in agitated and mad and wanting to prove a point and then bombing and moving, shuffling millions of people around, just saying, hey, go to the south and then bomb the south as well, we're now going to starve and also take away all the water you have. So now the people that need the water, the elderly and so on and so forth, now I'm starving people. For the life of me, and I guess this is just one of my cores, I understand. No, I can't say I understand. I feel and empathize with the pain and anger for what happened on October 7th. I feel and empathize. It hurts my heart because, again, as I said, one life gone hurts me. Seeing what happened hurts me. But I cannot empathize with the idea that I'm going to starve millions. I'm going to shuffle millions and bomb millions to get Hamas. Millions of people that didn't have anything to do with it. Millions of people that were against Hamas. But I'm going to bomb them, starve them, and say, Hamas, if you release these individuals, we'll now give your people some water. We won't bomb them. We'll give. That's the part that hurts me, is that, and I again, speaking up for the Israelis, what Hamas did was atrocious. Hamas needs to be gone. They're a terrorist. That ideology and that thought process. It's a terrorist organization. One of the things to fight against that, jobs for the people of Gaza, benefits and everything else, education. The reason that North Korea has such an issue is because North Korea, even Russia and some of the other places, is that propaganda machine. That's what goes on in Gaza and the West Bank, is that propaganda machine, because you keep your people blind from the outside world. Oh, well, this is why, hey, the Israelis are bombing you. It's not really the Israelis that used my child as a human shield, and now my child is gone from protecting you. That's a problem. So just bombing them back is not going to allow the Palestinian people or the people of Gaza or the people of West Bank or the Arab nations to come in and support, because all they're hearing from Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and all these other places is that Israel is killing these people. And what are you doing? Killing these people. You're proving them right. So my view is I would go in with somehow, hey, I need to work with a group of individuals that want to create a government and do right by the people. I think
that's exactly what they're wanting to do. I think that what you just said, just last sentence, that's exactly what Israel wants to do. But we've got to.
What are they doing?
They've got to get in there first. They've got to get rid of the cancer.
They know the leaders of Hamas are in Qatar. They're not bombing Qatar, they're bombing Gaza.
Well, maybe that's what they is that what you're saying? Maybe that's what they need to do, is bomb Qatar, get them out of the way, and then we're okay.
Not at all.
See,
not at all.
I think part of the problem is
bomb. I'm not saying bomb. Bomb is killing people. Again, I'm not for killing people.
Hamas is, though. You're minimizing that.
You're stuck on this whole bombing. Oh, Hamas.
No, I think you're stuck.
You asked me what I would do. I am not for killing people.
I'm
I
not
am not
either, but
for it.
I'm for cutting out cancer, and I'm
Well,
for
he was
cutting
just saying
out
and everything, but
the
on that
E.
note,
I
we
get
get
what
ready
you're
to
saying,
wind it
but
down and
cutting out
everything. I
cancer,
would say that
cutting out
even
10,000 for
what
get
earlier Mr.
1,000, that's
Washington
not
said, which
helpful.
is this notion of there have been people that have even been in Palestine that have literally argued what he said would get them killed and everything. Because I know that Jacoby on a past show mentioned that there have been protests where they literally were telling folks to F Hamas because they were not pro Hamas, even though they were Palestinian and all along those lines. And I think that's something Jacoby had brought up in past shows where they were protests where literally these folks were saying that even though that could be putting their lives and their family lives in jeopardy, as Mr. Washington just said, because there are some severe punishments that goes with that if they catch you and realize that you were the one that was initiating that. So there is a number of people, even in Palestine, that are not pro Hamas and all along those lines. So that's what I think is the point that Jacoby was trying to make, is that we can't lump them all in one group, because there's a number of folks that are definitely anti Hamas, even within the Gaza and definitely within some of the other organizations. And as Mr. Washington said, I'm not saying that the PLO, or the Palestinian Liberation, I think you even mentioned, Deidre, is the be all that ends all, because they've got some problems as well. But definitely there are probably some moderates, just like there are moderates within the Israeli government as well, because definitely there have been some conversations around the conservative nature of the Netanyahu government and all in that space. So I think that there are moderates that exist within all of this. Deidre, if you want to tell folks how they can reach you in really quick, and then I'll get out of here. We're about an hour over and all, but it's definitely been a worthwhile conversation, so I don't mind doing that and everything. So if you can tell folks how they can reach you, and then we'll get out of here. We got a media show and some other shows going on as well.
Thank you.
Definitely,
I appreciate that chance to do that. The easiest way is probably just all lowercase email Deetra McGee at yahoo.com, all lowercase, and it's DETRI. I know Deetra doesn't sound like an I, but if you make a long I out of it and put a little Southern Arkansas twang on it, we come up with Deetra. DETRIMCGHEE at yahoo.com or
just really
gmail.com.
quickly, since when most people think of Arkansas, they think of a certain family and everything, and you do sound like you might be more conservative than that particular family. But I was just wondering your take on the Clintons, as that is what a lot of people think of when they think of Arkansas, is y'all's great football team, the Razorbacks, as well as the Clintons, and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take just really quickly on.
Well, wish we had time for a Woo Pig Suey. We would do that. We've had some good football games, the last couple of them, so we're looking for an upturn on that. I'm not a Clinton supporter. I think Hillary did a lot of damage with her teaching all this that she tried to do with education, because my husband taught agriculture in the high schools for 37 years. And that was a big low ebb when the teachers' wisdom was challenged and they were all forced to undergo testing and all of that. There was a very negative effect that all of that had on the morale of the teaching system. So, and I am not pro-abortion, so I don't stand with her on that. She made one comment I thought was excellent lately, and I thought, well, maybe we could find a few things to agree on. She said she did not believe in a ceasefire, that it would benefit only Hamas. And I think a peacetime, what would you call, respite, a few hours here and there or a day here and there, but not a ceasefire, because they had a ceasefire in effect when Hamas attacked the Israelis. So we know they don't honor ceasefires. So, that's to me out of the question. But not a Clinton fan. I met him personally one time, and he actually pronounced my name right, looking at the name tag on my desk, which was impressive. Very charismatic man. No, thank you. I mean, I know that's a bit blunt, but you ask.
I did ask, and that's a fair enough question and everything. And hopefully we'll get you back on in the near future to share some of your other views as well. We've definitely had people on all sides of the aisle, both on this show as well as our World Politics shows, which is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I might reach out to you and see when other times you want to come on and share your opinions. Because like I said, as Jacoby said, we don't always agree, but we do like having people of different views and for us to have these very authentic conversations. So like I said, I might send you an email, and whenever you can jump on, we'd love to have you jump on. Debbie Peterson, who's more of a progressive or liberal kind of politician, but also is very anti-corruption, has been on a number of times. And Kelly Jones, who is a Democratic strategist, has been on, and some others have been on, including Adam Lamparello, who is a lawyer on our World Politics show. So we do get people of the cross-section of politics on both World Politics as well as World Edition. So I know that on behalf of Jatovia and others, I'd love to have you come back on and share some of your views whenever you have the time. And I know you're a busy lady with a lot of the things that you're doing and everything, but I'll keep sending you links, and whenever you want to jump on it, definitely jump on it whenever you feel like it. They're not always this long. They're usually about an hour.
I would love a help for me as a non-tech person. If you have time to just shoot me how my friends could get onto your podcast. I'm not that literate on that, so
I can do that. Well, one thing, they can go to the website. If they go to Pod TV shows on YouTube, they can actually see this show airing right now. It's actually airing on Nick's LinkedIn. Sometimes it runs on mine, and it'll probably re-air on Nick's, and they can also go, because it'll run several times during the course of the week on podtv.tv, which is both a website, and you can also find it on Pod TV Live on the Roku. So all of those are ways that they can reach it. I would start off with the YouTube, which is Pod TV shows on YouTube, and you will find that right there. So just go right to the YouTube. So I would tell them.
We'll do it. We'll do it the easy way. Mark, if you could do us a favor and send out the watch link too,
I would do that.
Then that might make it easier.
I'll do that. I'll actually put that in the chat once we're done and everything.
I know how to click. I don't know much else. I can click.
Do that right now. I'm going to end the show, and at the end, I'll put it in the chat. I do that sometimes for Lee Newton Rose, and you'll be able to do that in about a minute or two.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Enjoy.